past 24 hours, a new variant of the TSJ virus has emerged, putting European authorities in a very difficult situation. It's been confirmed that the mode of transmission is through blood contact.
They're organizing safe zones to relocate the entire population.
Your first plane trip.
The greater a population, the greater the number of infections.
Prepare to be evacuated to the nearest safe zone.
There's nothing to see here, folks.
Please, no matter what you hear, stay put.
Move away and keep walking, sir.
Do you hear me? No matter what.
Prepare to be
I
evacuated.
think of all those people and I wonder what could happen if there's another outbreak. I thought that we were gonna have all the time in the world. Victor, tell me the truth. Are we prisoners? Stop asking questions. It is never going to end.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Fresh Cuts. This is Mike. Joining me, as always, is Mr. Venom. What's up, Venom?
Greetings and salutations, spicy Spanish zombies. How the hell you doing, Mike? I'm doing pretty well.
I am doing well as well. Yeah, talking zombies tonight on a movie that I knew nothing about going ahead of time. Just happened to drop on Halloween, so interesting.
Mhm.
Also with us, it's Don and Ellie. What's up, Don?
Yeah, what's going on? Always happy to be here.
All right, so as I alluded to, we are covering a movie that dropped on Prime. It is a zombie apocalypse movie, and it is called Apocalypse Z: The Beginning of the End. Kind of sounds like almost like a video game title, but let's see. It's definitely, I guess, action horror, and the synopsis is: Vanel sheltering from a rabies-like disease which sweeps the planet until forced to leave and meet unlikely but essential traveling companions. I mean, if that doesn't sound like your generic setup for almost every zombie apocalypse movie. So I guess more on that in a moment. So yeah, general thoughts on this one. We'll start with Venom like usual. What did you think of Apocalypse Z?
Now, when I watch zombie movies, I feel like there's two major different types of zombie movies. There are the zombie movies that are over the top, that have a lot of gore, a lot of high octane set pieces, stuff like, the Dawn of the Dead remake or Army of the Dead, Train to Busan, stuff like that. Just, high action. And then there's the zombie movies that try to bring a little bit more of the drama into it, more of the human element, more of the survival aspect of being in a zombie apocalypse movie. Stuff like Cargo and, what was the French one? I forgot the title of it. With that guy. What was that?
Ravenous?
No, the French one.
Ravenous
was an American movie. I know what you're talking about now. No, that Ravenous I would put more in the more kind of action-y one. It was the French one where the guy was a drummer and he was. Thank you. That's the one I was thinking of. That's another one.
One of the two. I've been trying to say that. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, no worries. So like I said, this movie solidly falls into the second column. This is definitely more a story of survival. You could call this a character study because it's really a look into one man's survival, first through a tragedy in his life, and then a year later trying to survive the zombie apocalypse. We get a lot of the same tropes that we get in zombie movies, that humans are really the worst monsters in a zombie apocalypse. We get an ending that I think is not going to satisfy a lot of people. And if you look at the subtitle of this movie, the beginning of the end, it kind of gives you a clue at what you might be looking at with the end of this movie, but I'm going to leave it under my hat for now. Overall, I think this movie's really well made. Like the technical aspects of it can't be questioned. I think it's very well edited. The score is really nice. The cinematography is really well done. The performances are great. Like there's no cringy performances from anyone. Just the storytelling, what story there is here is, done very well. And I think cat lovers are really going to love it. Well, pet lovers in general, I think, are going to love this one. I myself count myself among those numbers. I am a huge pet lover. I am actually married to a veterinarian, for those who don't know. And yeah, it's great to see one man struggle to keep his cat alive during this zombie apocalypse. So and I'm watching this movie under the guise of a pet lover and just trying to see, okay, at what point does this guy do something that no human would ever do? But I'm happy to report that everything that Manel does in this movie makes sense. It's exactly what I would do to save my cat and my own skin as well. So well done there. Where this movie suffers, it's going to be its pacing. I think some people are going to look at this movie, especially coming in at exactly a 2-hour runtime, as maybe a little bit too slow paced. You go long stretch, and I mean long stretches of this movie, upwards of a half hour, with no zombie action whatsoever, just people kind of interacting with each other. Some people, we get kind of when the zombie apocalypse first begins, we get kind of a sweet story of human interaction of our main character, Manel, meeting one of his neighbors and them having, a couple of days together surviving through this zombie apocalypse. Then once we get past the halfway point, then we start meeting some of the more shitty humans that tend to pop up during a zombie apocalypse, at least in these movies. So, like I said, nothing ultra original in this, but I gotta say, I'm not the biggest fan of this movie. I compared this to Cargo, and ultimately I think Cargo is one of the best emotional zombie movies of the last 25 years. Like that one, Train to Busan. There are zombie movies out there that tug at the heartstrings. And even though this movie attempted to do that, I think it fell a little bit short. And I also think that, like I said, the ending is going to be very contentious to a lot of people. They're going to be a little upset that, they're kind of that they get that ending after spending 2 hours with this film. And we're talking 2 hours, a 2-hour zombie movie with maybe 10 to 15 minutes of action tops in the film. Like I said, it's mostly a dialogue driven movie. It's mostly a character study. But it's objectively a well-made film. I think if you're okay with slow burns, especially a slow burn that maybe doesn't provide the biggest payoff at the end of the film, I think you're going to enjoy this film. Obviously, if it hasn't been obvious already, the movie is in Spanish, though there is an English dubbed version available on Amazon Prime. They got the Spanish and the English version available, so you've got options. And if you've got access to Amazon Prime, you got a decent little zombie movie to check out. But like I said, for me, this one left me wanting a little bit more. It didn't quite provide the emotional punch that I was looking for, and it definitely didn't provide the high octane action sequence that I like to see in some zombie movies as well. So it's like they shot their shot, but they just came up a little bit short. And like I said, that ending, man, it's going to be a point of contention for a lot of people, especially myself. Once we get into the spoiler section, I'll be able to rant a little bit more about that ending. But yeah, I'll leave my general thoughts at that. It's a very well-made movie. Technically, nothing wrong with it. Really just a matter of the storytelling and the pacing, how it works for the individual movie viewer. So back to Mike.
All right, and just as quick as it's back to me, I'll toss it right over to Don for your general thoughts on Apocalypse.
Yeah, I'm kind of right where Venom is for pretty much the exact same reason. Whenever we've covered zombie films in the past, I've been very vocal about the fact that my preference for zombie films is strictly for them to be a special effects technician demo reel, where I find very little value in following characters. I just want to attach a name to a face and then just watch people get ripped to pieces for 90 minutes. That's basically my involvement, and my love of zombies is anything that follows that kind of format is automatically given an 8 out of 10. So yeah, this one here kind of going against the grain and going for the character study piece is not my preferred route. Although I do enjoy the general premise itself is actually not bad. I do think that there is something here that would have been. It's enjoyable in the right context, and I'm well aware of the fact that I'm not the target audience for this. So yeah, I do agree that everything here is by the technical, by the basis of technical standards. It's very well done. I love the look of it. I love the city here. There's a decent setup at play here, like I said, with his past tragedies, everything kind of turning to shit, and then struggling to survive. I think that kind of has a solid central setup here. By the half-hour mark, if you would have given us some zombie action to kind of put everything in motion and give us some kind of context as to we've got everything set up, and then it's just wall-to-wall zombie action, him trying to survive, him trying to keep his cat alive, meet with neighbors, other survivors, try to get out of the city. I think there's something there that could have developed into maybe not the most original zombie film. I mean, the one that kind of reminded me of this was a much slower paced version of #Alive, the South Korean one that we did. I think it was.
Yeah.
I think it was like just before the pandemic started, or like right in the middle of that. I think that was kind of like the first one that really kind of developed into exploring that kind of survival kind of tactics that this one kind of employs as well. I do wholeheartedly enjoy #Alive much more than this one, but it's kind of in the same vein of a lone survivor that is put through the ringer and then tries to get out of the city and keep himself out of the zombies' clutches, while there's also like another group that kind of comes in along. Like it's not at the halfway point because it's not an hour in where he starts meeting everybody, but there's like a secondary group that he kind of develops a relationship with, for lack of a better term, because it's not anything like that, but the idea of getting other survivors together and trying to develop a exit plan to get out of the city and keep themselves alive. That's kind of where this one feels and kind of falls in line with. But #Alive did the zombie action 10 times better. But yeah, I'm kind of right there with him. This is just way too slow. It's way too long before we get anything, and there's not a lot of that, just people getting decimated and being overwhelmed by the swarm of zombies that are running around. We don't really have like that big major set piece that even, something like World War Z had, where you see like the swarm overwhelming the city and, like they're trying to attack the rescue copter, that, infamous scene that I think it's the poster artwork, or at least like it served as the inspiration for it. But there's like nothing like that in this kind of a film. It's much more low key, much more downbeat, much more of a character studies. You start realizing what's going on inside the guy's head as he tries to keep everything together as best he can. It's fine for what it is. It's just not for me. That's just not what I'm necessarily into. I'm well aware of that and I can recognize it. I don't think there's anything genuinely wrong here. It's just this is a kind of film that doesn't play to my interests, and I really don't think that there's much wrong genuinely with it if you're into this kind of thing. I mean, everything is well made, everything is well shot and well handled. The guy's intelligent. I mean, he doesn't really do anything really stupid or put himself in danger for unnecessary reasons. Yeah, maybe some of the scenes with the cat could fall under that category, but I don't mind it for several reasons. We'll get to that later, but yeah, the main thing here is whether or not you appreciate this kind of setup and appreciate this kind of pacing. It's more of a personal preference than anything that's genuinely wrong with it. So, I mean, yeah, there's not much else to say that'll, give, saying much more will give away spoilers. So I'll keep it there and kick it back to you, Mike.
Okay. So me, when it comes to zombie movies, I wouldn't say I necessarily have a preference because I like both types. As far as this movie specifically, I think The main issue, I agree, is pacing. Also, I think it tried to cover like a lot of ground. Even with a 2 hour running time, it felt like the movie when we first start. It almost felt like what 28 days later would have been during the 28 days that our main guy was in the hospital. Like what it would have looked like as the apocalypse is first kind of starting, and the breakouts happen a little at a time. You get your news alerts where it doesn't seem like anything major at first, and then it builds and builds. And to be honest, like I didn't mind the pacing in the first and second act. To me, the problem is you're assuming that it's going to build to something bigger once we get to the third act, and then it kind of just almost slows down to a crawl. We get like one cool sequence where our group of survivors are hoarding off like an attack in their kind of makeshift safety device thing that I don't want to explain it too much, but that was pretty cool. But otherwise, yeah, when a slow burn doesn't like burn at the end, that's an issue for me. Because otherwise, I don't mind slow burns. If you give me good characters that I care about and you give me a good story, I'm fine waiting for like the third act for like major things to happen. Just in this one, I would say that was the biggest issue. I would almost also say that because of like our different set pieces and the scale of what they're trying to cover, this almost would have worked better as like a mini series. Like it doesn't have to be like a full-fledged TV show, but like just like a mini series, because like you could have like an episode or two covering like the initial breakout of this virus or whatever it was. Then you could do like a couple episodes on the ship, because I thought that was kind of cool, and then you could end the series with that third act. But they tried to fit a lot into the 2 hour running time. But yeah, the pace was kind of off. And yeah, in order to enjoy this one, you had to be okay with like lots of story and not carnage happening in between like our few times it does. I think what we do get is well executed. We just don't get a ton, so that's going to factor into like everyone's personal enjoyment based on their own preferences. Is the movie okay? The movie's decent. I would say it covers a lot of familiar ground. Anyone that watches lots of zombie movies, you're going to see all the familiar tropes of like what a zombie apocalypse looks like, what the characters go through. It's very much been there, done that. But at the same time, it's fine. It's okay. It's probably not going to be a memorable movie for people. I wouldn't call it a standout movie, but it's also not bad. It's just kind of middle of the road. What else can I say? I mean, I did like our main character, and yeah, that's pretty much all. To me, there's not a lot. There's not even that much to discuss extensively with one, just because it feels like a movie you've seen many times before when it comes to zombie apocalypse movies. So I guess I'll leave it at that for the moment. Back to you, Venom.
Yeah, this movie definitely does not reinvent the zombie movie wheel by any stretch of the imagination. But one thing I wanted to say is that for me, a good slow burn is like a burning fuse on an explosive device. It's just slowly burning, slowly burning, slowly burning, and eventually there's a kaboom. There's usually an earth-shattering kaboom. Well, this movie, unfortunately, has the fuse, but it has no kaboom, and that's kind of the problem. And even though, well, I don't really want to get into the ending quite yet, but even though they do with the ending what they do with it, it just, we don't get that satisfying, final set piece or, big reveal, big twist, whatever you want to go with. So unfortunately, yeah, it's like, this is a fun ride for what it is, but it just doesn't go anywhere, unfortunately. And, once we get to the end, I'll have my little rant about this ending and how I don't think movies like this should be doing endings like this, but we'll get into it in a little bit. Anything else you guys want to talk about before we get into our spoiler section?
Try not to think about much.
Mike?
I mean, no, not really. It's just, yeah, no.
No, I don't blame you. Like I said, as much as I praise the movie for its technical prowess and acting and things like that, it's not the most original zombie movie in the world. In fact, there's not really much original to it at all when you really think about it, other than the fact that
Oh, I
these,
did.
you know,
I guess I could say I did like the cat. The cat.
oh, hey,
companion.
Luculo. Oh, Luculo was great. I even like his name, Luculo. It's one of those words that's kind of fun to say. Luculo. I like it. All right, folks, let's get into this one. No need for like a major walkthrough for this one. This is your basic paint by numbers zombie movie. Our main character is named Manel. He's married. Eventually, there's a car accident. His wife unfortunately passes away in the car accident, leaving him alone with the cat. The cat, of course, being his wife's cat, so now he reveres that cat as like the last thing of his wife's that he still has with him. And eventually, a virus starts kind of taking shape. And, you know, I'm being really fast with this. At this point, we're already 20 minutes into the movie, but basically a virus starts appearing. It's called the TSJ virus, the TSJ virus. I'm not sure what it stands for. I'm not sure if they actually went over it in the movie. I do remember one of the newscasts saying that they haven't actually named the virus yet, so they just called it the TSJ virus for whatever it's worth. We see news reports of more and more cases being reported, and then, you know, sometimes we'll see a report talking about how the cases have started to slow down. So it definitely has parallels with the COVID-19 pandemic of a few years ago. You know, people watching the news, watching, you know, that channel, that 24-hour channel that constantly had updated like death tolls and reported cases and things like that. But then eventually a new strain of the virus makes itself, rears its ugly head, if you will. And with this strain of the virus, basically you can catch it within minutes. And they figure out that it's basically an exchange of blood or bodily fluids. So obviously a bite, you know, if you get infected blood on you, things like that. So again, not reinventing the wheel, very similar. Obviously, this is more a 28 days later type horde zombies than actual, you know, reanimated corpses. I always feel the need to point that out because even though I'm going to use the word zombies throughout this review, just realize that in my deepest heart of hearts, I don't believe these are zombies, but I'm not going to get into that discussion. Anyway, eventually Manel gets a phone call from his sister, his older sister, basically telling him to come to her apartment or to meet at the airport, and that they're going to fly to the Canary Islands, to try to get away from the mainland, to get away from the virus. Once he gets to the airport, all flights are canceled, and he starts to drive home. He gets a phone call from his sister saying, okay, forget about trying to get out here now. Just go ahead and go home and wait for our next instructions. The next day, the military makes an announcement saying that they're going to evacuate all cities, all major, cities in Spain. And it seems like Manel, our main character, is down to go with the military, but then he receives a phone call from his sister once again. And this time it's his sister vehemently telling him, do not go with the military. No matter what they say, no matter what they try to do, don't go with them. Just hide until they disappear, which is exactly what he does. He ends up on the night that they're evacuating the city and they're going door to door, knocking on doors, trying to break. Basically, if you don't answer the door, they're going to try to break your door down. Luckily, Manel is a little bit of a survivalist, and also with the help of some YouTube videos, actually reinforced his apartment. He put up traps. He reinforced his front door so it couldn't be kicked in, stuff like that. Once the military is, convinced that there's nobody home, they end up leaving. And then Manel is left in this town, conceivably by himself. After a couple of days, he realizes that he's running out of food, so he tries to break into neighbors' houses, going house to house, trying to see if he can get some food. Eventually, he breaks into a neighbor's house and finds an old woman living by herself, just kind of sitting there surviving the zombie apocalypse. Granted, the zombie apocalypse is only a few days old at this point, but just this old woman just living by herself. They end up developing a friendship. She actually starts giving him ideas of where he can go to potentially get some food out of people's houses, because this old woman is one of those old women who just kind of sits at her front window and watches everyone in her neighborhood. So she knows like who went on vacation right before the zombie apocalypse started, what family went on vacation, which means there might be food in their house if they would have left something there while they were on vacation, stuff like that. Eventually, it's decided that, Eventually, what happens is Manel hears a radio broadcast, very similar to A Quiet Place Part 2, where basically this recording tells him, come to this area off the shore of Spain.
And 28 days later, same thing.
And 28 days later, for that matter. Yeah, good point. Thank you. See, this movie's not original, my friends. Anyway, it tells them to go to this certain location, and that from there, they are flying people out to the Canary Islands. Again, apparently, the Canaries are like the promised land. Like, there's no zombies or no confirmed cases of the virus. There's military presence, so everybody's basically trying to get to the Canaries. The next morning, Manel goes to pack up and get the old lady, because even though she's wheelchair bound, he's still adamant that he's going to help her out, to the point that they got into an argument the night before where he's like, no, you're coming with me. You don't have a choice. I'm not leaving you alone here. Unfortunately, the next morning when he gets up to go get her, it turns out the woman took her own life. They don't really imply specifically how she did it, if it was pills or whatever, but basically she left a note to Manel letting him know, my journey is over, now go save yourself. So at this point, Manel takes Luculo, the cat, and they decide to start traveling. Manel owns a boat, so he's going to try to use a boat to get to this location off the coasts where the radio broadcast is telling him to go. While taking his boat, first off, his boat ends up getting stolen. When he gets to the pier, there's no boats left. There's like literally one boat floating off the edge of the pier, but it's not his boat. He goes, he swims over towards it, realizes that it's not running, but then he hears something inside, again, nothing we haven't seen in Zombie or Cargo or any other movie like that with a boat. But instead of a full-grown zombie, when he opens the door, it's a fucking baby. It's a baby zombie in one of those high chairs, just sitting there. Obviously, it probably died of malnutrition and, somehow got the zombie virus. And it was a pretty gnarly looking zombie baby, way better than the one we get in the Dawn of the Dead remake, that's for sure. So let's see. Eventually, Manel finds a motorboat that still has a working motor and gas in the engine, so he takes it and he continues on his journey. Eventually, the motor either fails or he runs out of gas, but luckily, just as he does, a large fishing boat finds him. They're able to pull him up on the boat, and it turns out the boat is filled with Ukrainians. We get a group of Ukrainian sailors who are basically, going around looking for survivors. At least that's the story that they're telling Manel. The first night that he's on the boat, he hears some commotion outside. He looks out the porthole in his room, the window, and sees another boat with a family of 4. And they're like begging for help and everything. But Manel ends up falling back asleep, and then the next morning when he asks about the family, he's told, oh, there were no survivors last night. I don't know what you're talking about. So obviously, as the viewer, we're starting to realize, well, there's something going on. And isn't it weird that this movie took a chance and made the human antagonists Ukrainians? Like the Ukraine is like the darling of the world right now because of what they have to deal with their war with Russia. And then here's this movie from Spain making Ukrainians the villains. So go figure. Ballsy. I'll give him credit for that. So, of course, Manel figures out that they're keeping the people alive that they think will be useful to them, that could either, work for them or provide them. Like Manel is providing them information about where to find materials in his hometown. Eventually, Manel says, fuck it, I'm not going to be a part of this. He ends up packing up Luculo. Once again, this poor cat has got a lot of miles on her in this damn movie. Once again, he tries to escape the boat, but while trying to escape, he ends up finding two of the people from that boat the night before that he saw land, realizes that people are being held prisoner, and their stuff is being looted, obviously, for any materials that might be able to be used. Manel, with the goodness of his heart, tries to let these people go, unties them. Unfortunately, a couple of the Ukrainian guards show up, or one of the Ukrainian guards shows up with a gun, kills one of the hostages, but then Victor, the person who Victor is actually half Ukrainian, half Spanish, so he's actually able to communicate. He's the go-between between the Ukrainians and Manel. He's actually somewhat of a good guy. Like, he doesn't like what the other Ukrainians are doing, but at the same time, he understands this is a new world. This is the zombie apocalypse. Rules and laws are out the door. It's about survival, and if you have to align yourself with some shitty people to survive, well, some of us will do that. Sometimes survival is more important than morals to some people, and I'm not sure which way I would lean. I'd have to wait until I was in that situation. But I'd like to think that I'd try to survive no matter what the cost. But anyway, point is, Manel, and with the help of Victor, Manel and Victor are able to escape the boat. Unfortunately, Victor gets shot. The plan is for them to get to the hospital because Manel knows that there's a helicopter there. Victor, as it turns out, is a helicopter pilot, so he would be able to pilot the helicopter and get them to the Canary Islands.
Of course.
So
that's another thing I was going to say about this movie. Like, it has some very neatly wrapped coincidences to help everything move along.
Very convenient. Multiple convenient plot twists in this movie. Absolutely. So like I said, they end up going to the hospital. They end up meeting another group of people, 2 women, 1 nurse, and 1 nun. Sister Cecilia, and then 3 children that they've been keeping alive there. Like maybe 8 to 10 years old, ranging from 8 to 10 years old. We end up getting multiple set pieces back and forth. Eventually, the Ukrainian sailors do end up catching up. How the hell they knew they were going to this hospital is beyond me, but whatever. Somehow they followed them there, and they basically go into the hospital, guns a-blazing, just, taking out zombies left and right. Eventually, and once Manel and the rest of the hospital group realize that the Ukrainians have arrived, they decide to make a beeline towards the helicopter to try to, escape. And that was the safety device that Mike alluded to earlier. Basically, they took a bunch of rolling cages, that you would use to like serve lunches or things like that in a hospital. And they took like 6 or 7 of them and basically made like a barricade, like a shield that all of them were in the middle of. And since all of these cages were on wheels, they literally were able to all wheel out together in one formation. Now, what's funny is that when they first got out to the rooftop, the zombies didn't even notice them, which I thought, oh shit, if you're quiet enough, you can actually get by these zombies, no problem. Of course, eventually one of the zombies does take notice, and they end up making, the group of zombies end up making a beeline for our survivors that are inside of the safety device. They eventually get to the entrance where the helicopter is, the helipad, and they're able to get away except for Manel. Manel, unfortunately, has to stay back to prevent a couple of straggler zombies from, taking out anybody else in the group or the helicopter. While Victor is trying to start the helicopter, the Ukrainian sailors finally arrive to the roof, and they start just, again, guns a-blazing, just taking out all the zombies. Eventually, they take out the ones in the part of the courtyard that they're in, on the part of the helipad that they're in, because there's multiple sections that are fenced off, and some of the sections have like a multitude of zombies in it, whereas other sections might not have as many. And then the part of it that the helicopter is in has no zombies. No zombies have been able to get into that part of the helipad. Anyway, point is, the Ukrainians show up. They realize that there's no escape. They've got Manel pinned down. They've got the helicopter pinned down, because obviously the Ukrainians are armed to the teeth, and Manel and Victor and the rest of the group at the hospital have no firing weapons whatsoever. They have axes and clubs and shit like that. So Manel, and I'll give credit to Manel. Manel, in his infinite wisdom, decides to, rather than give up to the Ukrainians, breaks a padlock that's locking another section of the helipad, and it's a section that has a multitude of zombies in it. So of course, once he breaks that lock, he ends up hiding behind the chain link door. He opens it all the way so that he can hide behind it in the little cubby hole that it creates. And then all the zombies just go and attack all the Ukrainians. They end up taking out all the Ukrainians. And eventually Manel is able to fight his way through the zombies out to the helicopter, and then they take off. And it seems like, there's only a few minutes left in the movie, so it seems like, we've gotten to the end. They escaped. They're going to get to the Canary
Islands, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But as they're flying to the Canary Islands, they start to hear chatter on the radio, like military chatter. And then suddenly 2 F-16 jets fly right by them. And at the exact same time that those jets fly by, Manel finally gets a phone call from his sister, and she's yelling at him, "Don't come to the Canaries! Don't come to the Canaries! No matter what you do, do not come here!" And then the last shot of the movie is those 2 F-16 jets continuing to fly towards the Canary Islands, and then the fucking movie fades to black, and that's it. Do you believe it? This fucking movie ends on a cliffhanger. Now it's time for my rant, ladies and gentlemen. I don't give a shit if you are intending on this to become a franchise, to either become a trilogy or longer than that. You do not end the first chapter on a fucking cliffhanger. You're basically saying, you'll have to come back to find out the ending of this first movie. Let me tell you, Night of the Living Dead didn't end in a cliffhanger. Star Wars didn't end in a cliffhanger. Fucking, The Matrix didn't end in a cliffhanger. Even though all of those movies created franchises, you do not end the first chapter in a franchise with a fucking cliffhanger. I don't care who you are. We haven't invested enough time with these characters or this franchise to give a shit about a cliffhanger. Like, yes, this movie is objectively well made, but like I said, there's not enough here for me to give a shit and come back here next year or the year after to see, Apocalypse Z Part 2. So, I'm sorry, filmmakers. Just don't, any filmmakers listening to my voice right now, even if you're intending on your movie to be a fucking franchise, a trilogy or whatever, do not end the first chapter with a cliffhanger. That's a fucking royal no-no, and it will instantly get me to boycott your franchise. So please don't do it. I'm done.
I was gonna say, even if you've run out of running time to where you're not gonna have anything, or you're not gonna have our characters actually on the Canary Islands, if you just get give us a shot of the helicopter close enough to where we can kind of get an idea of this is why she was saying don't come here, maybe it's overrun, maybe the jets are gonna blow the island up, or just give us something to tell us what the hell's going on, because it makes me think of the Dawn remake where they escaped on the boat and they made it to the island, and then I think it was it mid-credit scenes where
it was during the credits.
It showed them on the islands, and there was some type of zombies on the island too. Even that, it wasn't a full-fledged story on the island, but it just gave us enough to know, this is why they're in trouble.
Oh, hell yeah. That ending is a masterpiece compared to this ending. I love that ending, actually, in all honesty. I always really like that ending. But yeah, this movie doesn't have an ending. Like I said, it just kind of stops. And then you're expected to come back in a year or two to see how the adventure ends. And it's like, that's a little dirty in my opinion. I'm sorry.
If the way the nature of how it ended, I can't believe that it wasn't designed for like another one, because like that's just too it's like it's almost not ambiguous but ambiguous at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a little much. I like I said, it's unnecessary. That, like Mike said, you could give us something to tie the end of this one up so that there's just enough interest to maybe want to come back, but at the very least we can say, okay, I know how this chapter ends. Like, I don't know how this chapter ends. They're still up in the sky watching these F-16s fly towards the Canary Islands, and that's it. It's like, that's not a fucking ending. I'm sorry. I hate to rail against it because, my friends, I am a Spaniard, and it does my heart no good whatsoever to speak so ill of a Spanish horror film, but I kind of have to. I gotta call it the way I see it. Yeah, this one, there's just not enough investment for me to want to come back and see how this story ends. Obviously, when the second chapter of this eventually does come out, if it's the only thing out that week, we'll probably still cover it because I still love my Spanish movies and I still love zombie movies. But if there's anything else to do that week, we'll probably lean towards that because I'm just not invested enough. You know, I, a person who absolutely adores slow burns, and I'm not invested enough to want to return to this franchise. So take from that what you will, listeners. And I think I'm done talking about this movie.
That was the beginning of the end.
And that's the other thing, too. You name the first chapter of your movie the beginning of the end. It's like you're tipping your hat that this is going to be a franchise before I even start the movie. What the fuck?
Well, then you're like Bruno Mattei and do Zombies the beginning and have that be part 2.
There you go. All right, Mike, close us out.
All right. Yeah, that's gonna do it for Zombie, or I was gonna say Zompocalypse, Apocalypse Z. The beginning of the it's the beginning of the end for my night, I guess, when I can't even pronounce things right. Yep. Before we get out of here, though, let's hear what new things we have for people to listen to. So, Venom, I know you got a new Creature Comforts coming. So, what do we got?
Oh, my friends, it does me a great pleasure and honor to announce that on November 4th, Godzilla Day, which I know as you're listening to this episode, either you're listening to it on November 4th or after, past November 4th. But it, like I said, it does me so much honor to be able to say that on November 4th, we released Creature Comforts episode number 32, which is our review of Godzilla 1954, also known as Gojira. It's obviously a monumental piece of cinema that every creature feature should, hell, not only watch, but study. Like, there's so much, beneath the layers of this film, so much to dissect. But anyway, we had a great time talking about it, and it turned out to be a little mini underwater kaiju from outer space reunion, as our old friend from Underwater Kaiju, Mr. Jerry Herring, joined us for the review. It was kind of a no-brainer that I invite the man that, got me involved in my first kaiju or creature podcast to come on to our new show and talk about what is potentially, and in my opinion, definitely the greatest monster movie ever made. So yeah, as you listen to this episode 32 of Creature Comforts will be available. So check that out. If you're able to hear it on November 4th, that would be great, because as you all know, November 4th is the actual 70th anniversary of the release of the original Godzilla. And of course, it is Godzilla Day around the world. So everyone, obviously, this episode is probably going to be released after that. So I hope you guys all watched a Godzilla movie on Godzilla Day. I myself am actually watching 30 Godzilla movies this month. Yes, I have decided I'm watching one Godzilla movie every day in the month of November, and I'm watching them in order. So today I watched Godzilla Reigns again. Tomorrow it's King Kong versus Godzilla, and so on and so forth. So yeah, just happy birthday, Big G, and check out our review of potentially our favorite monster movie ever made. And unfortunately, that's all I have, Mike. Like I said, all my guest appearances have been postponed. Hopefully, we'll have something to announce for the Crystal Lake gift shop sooner than later. And unfortunately, we were supposed to record the main show this weekend, but unfortunately, because of my wanting to make sure that the Godzilla episode was edited in time to be released on November 4th, I was not able to get a chance to watch all the movies that I needed to for the main show. So that'll be delayed about a week. So look for the next episode of the main show in about a week or two. Otherwise, that's all I have.
All right. How about you, Don?
Yeah, as mentioned, Creature Comforts. I'm really just looking forward to that one. Such a fun time getting the gang back together, getting everybody back on the same page, discussing one of the best movies ever made. Yeah, other than that, only other thing is upcoming horror countdown.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, hell yeah. For me, I ain't got nothing. So that's very easy. This week is Heretic this week?
That's it this week, right?
Yeah.
It's this Friday.
Right.
Yeah,
8th, right?
I think so. That sounds right. Yeah,
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it's Heretic this week.
Is
I
that
think we
the
have a
last
guest.
theatrical horror release that I'm know of? Is it?
No. We still got Nosferatu. We
Oh,
still
yeah.
got at least one more
Nosferatu.
that's in the back of my head, and I can't think of it. Damn it. And I thought we were getting a Christmas horror movie in theaters this year, too. For some reason, because I'll look at the AMC
I think that's the
app
one
and
you're
I'll
thinking
look.
of. Yeah, I think that may be the one extra one you're thinking of.
Yeah. So I mean, we'll be in the theater a couple more times this year, but just I would say 2 or 3 at the absolute most. But yep, before we start our prep for our best of show.
Sounds good. All right. Well, with that said, thank you everybody for listening to another episode of Fresh Cuts. We will be back in about a week talking Heretic, it sounds like. So until then, let's say bye to our listeners.
Later.
Always save your pets. Always save your pet. As soon as you get a pet, you are responsible for getting that pet through the zombie apocalypse. So always be prepared.
And it'll make people love your main character even better too.
Yep.
Hey, peace.